I recorded 6 records on Game's new album. I did West Side Story, How We Do, Hated to Love It, Church for Thugs, Special, and Higher. He came back recently from overseas and it's like he's feeling himself, like because of how well his record is selling, you know. So I openly I wouldn't expose what I did for the project, but I wrote those records. I created the concept of those records and he rapped around it. He's a great rapper, he's not a good songwriter. It's a major difference. He says a lot of people's names for shock value. He says things he doesn't mean. He says a lot of things and take it back. You know, he had issues with Joe Buttons, then he runs into him in a club and they're taking pictures. He had issues with Memphis Bleak, then he ran into Memphis Bleak in Miami, it was no problem. See, I'm not a fake person, I'm gonna tell you exactly what it is. He has a lot of inconsistencies.
To remain at the top of a genre like hip-hop, you're naturally going to need to violate your own sense of right and wrong from time to time. With up-and-comers breathing down your neck on all sides, infringing upon your moral code can be a difficult but necessary thing to do if you hope to stay in the limelight. Constantly compelled to assert himself into beefs even when his fans wish that he'd let the music do the talking, this need to balance public persona and personal views is one that the game has wrestled with his entire career. Once an immensely talented rapper and an agitator who's allowed his feuds to create more headlines than his music, the game has been left with a muddled perception of who he is, and in doing so, has become a textbook example of how not to age gracefully in hip-hop. Where some of his contemporaries from the early 2000s have transitioned into hip-hop moguls, the game, who is technically an OG with a classic under his belt, constantly engages in gimmicky behavior that you'd expect from clout rappers, such as the recent video in which he made a woman drink from a trash can to get a pair of Balenciagas. But throughout the years since he dropped the documentary, an album which began and ended his affiliation with Dr. Dre, Interscope, and G-Unit in one fell swoop, the game has been in so many beefs that there are entire articles dedicated to him beefing with everyone from Meek Mill and Razkaz to Lil Durk and Suge Knight, something that completely contradicts what he said at the beginning of his career.
I don't battle, I don't beef with, I don't start. Unless I hear my name, then I'm coming.
But at this point, beefing has become a massive part of his persona. Confident, yet somehow always striving to prove himself in ways that make him a walking contradiction, the game's urge to interject himself into every cultural matter makes it seem like he's stirring the pot simply because he can, rather than because he has something worthwhile to contribute. For example, when he dove in to defend Lil Wayne during his beef with Young Thug in 2015, the resounding sentiment from fans was confusion. And even more frustratingly, it contradicted his well-documented attempts to squash tension with Thug before issues could develop. While Thugger and the game had little to no ties, his bipolar tendencies have also impacted on his relationship with his peers. Though it feels like ancient history now in light of them becoming BFFs, this is a man who went from endorsing Kanye in every public interview to spitting, "I held Kim Kardashian by the only to, once again, back down.
There's a few times where Ye called me after he heard me say some and was like, "What's up?" And I'm like, "What's up?" He like, "Come on, man." And I'm like, "Come on what?" He like, "Kim's mad about the line. Can you just not do it anymore?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So I stopped for a while. And then I did it again and he got a little off at me. We didn't speak for like 6 months. I'm not saying it was due to that, but I could hear the anger in his voice a little bit the second time. I felt he meant it and I love him to death. So then I really just axed it. And we've been smooth ever since.
Okay. So. Willing to spark issue with those he has admiration for, it could be argued that he has no concrete sense of self. But otherwise, the other explanation is that he's all too familiar with the promotional might of controversy and shock value and has used it as his primary marketing tactic for almost a decade now. In recent years, he promptly walked back claims of retirement, and in some ways, it seemed like he only did so because he still didn't feel like he received the flowers that he believed he earned. "I've had a great run and surpassed my rap goals a long time ago," he said at the time when he was to bow out with 2019's Born to Rap. "It will always be quality over quantity from where I stand. The real music will always prevail and this album will cap off an amazing run." There's a lot of moving pieces to put together the quality of music. These days, man, I don't know if I have time no more. My kids are getting older and they're more active in their life. I just want to chill, man. But as he continued to keep his name in the press, it never really felt like the game was truly ready to leave. And by 2021, he was already publicly in album mode. When you can't be taken at your word within a genre that's obsessed with accountability like no other, people are always going to look at you sideways. To his credit, the game has discussed this before and doesn't believe it to be a character flaw, or as some believe, bipolar. "I work off how I feel at the moment. That's why everyone thinks, oh, game is whack, oh, he changes his mind." No, we all change our mind. That's why we're just in the spotlight. And so you can get locked onto my decisions and me being very opinionated, but if I feel a certain way, that's just how I'm feeling. I'll be very vocal about it. If I don't feel the same way tomorrow, I will say that. Somebody might say I'm bipolar because I always change my mind, and I am. So if my bipolar is attacked, then that's me. Hot-headed to the extent that he was schooled by Nipsey Hussle and how he handled his feud with Meek Mill, the game has proven himself to not have the ability to conduct himself like an esteemed veteran. But his worst attributes probably aren't helped by the fact that he's surrounded by people with the same mindset. Namely, his longtime manager, Wack 100. Coupled with Wack's rise to fame with the help of Clubhouse, his tendency to run his mouth with complete disregard has reached the point where he's negatively impacted the game's career, like when he claimed to have possession of a gay tape involving Nipsey Hussle, which led to the leaked song World Tours, a highly anticipated song featuring Nipsey, which was set to appear on Drillmatic, to later be scrapped by Nipsey's brother, Black Sam.
You being their feelings. You notice you got Meek Mills and a bunch of people over there Wack really don't see eye to eye with, or whoever he work with, My ain't his game that drove around LA. He been the biggest Nipsey supporter ever.
With many philosophers suggesting that we as humans are the sum total of the people we surround ourselves with, Wack's constant need for conflict could go some way to explaining why Game always leads with chaos in order to keep himself relevant. And when it comes to this strategy, there's no clearer example of this than his 10-minute Eminem diss track, Black Slim Shady. Teased months in advance, Game and Wack 100 led the rollout for this new record with the promise that he'd be going at Eminem simply to show that he was the better rapper. While for others, it seemed like the real reason behind the sudden animosity towards Shady came from his omission from Dr. Dre's Super Bowl performance.
We on the West Coast are the only that have this crab in the barrel mentality where we want to keep down. Snoop is an icon, Dre is an icon, M is an icon, but M is not from LA. 50 is not from LA, and I'm not taking away from the fact that they were on the Super Bowl, but LA have been on a Detroit Super Bowl or a New York Super Bowl. It just wouldn't have happened. LA all around the Super Bowl, and I don't get the call.
With Dr. Dre's producer Focus rightly pointing out that you can't depend on an unstable cat for something as epic as that, it didn't stop the game from hyping up a potential beef with Shady. Naturally, the timing of this feud was conspicuous, with Game only deciding to fire shots at Eminem when his first album in 3 years was being finalized. And for those familiar with Game's journey, you'll know that this isn't the first time that a beef has coincided with a new album. In the wake of Karrueche and Chris Brown breaking up, the Game liked a series of photos to bait Chris Brown to respond in the lead up to the documentary too, and to most people, that timescale was way too convenient. At this point, while it kinda makes sense for the Game to align beefs with his albums, it doesn't change the fact that when the track finally arrived, any publicity that it may have earned him was overshadowed by the fans' lukewarm response to the track, with some even accusing him of coming off as desperate for trolling.
Because I can't see Eminem responding to it. There was nothing incendiary to make M say, oh no, this one tripping. From that track, taking Eminem's style, 3 or 4 different flows of M, then going and commenting under Haley's pictures, this mother trolling the out of M to get him to jump.
Anyone making a diss towards one of the biggest rappers in the world, you're gonna walk away remembering at least 1 or 2 bars. We all remember Your Beard Is Weird from MGK. If the song was harder, you'd have some takeaways.
He didn't smack Eminem. If this was a boxing match, this mother was just ducking and maybe throwing a jab or 2, and that was it.
Like, this was a hug. I just don't get what he's doing.
Whether you like it or not, having other rappers' names in his mouth across both a flattering or derogatory context has been pivotal to his career and is at the bedrock of many of his most iconic verses. From Dreams to My Life and How We Do, a steady stream of allusion towards others helped him reach a superstar status. And while the Game has rolled with the punches in some ways and evolved his sound, this need to use affiliations or anger towards others as a fuel for his career has been the one thing that stopped him from ever truly ascending to the top. But despite the limitations that his over-reliance on name-dropping and overblown issues has had, Game has claimed that he isn't concerned by the discussion over his place among the industry's leading lights anyway.
That don't never with me, because you got to understand where it's coming from. You got somebody at the bottom of their grandparents' house in the comments saying you fell off. Like, who the are you? To be able to hate on my music or hate on me or hate on my career, you got to be zoomed in and you got to be listening. So like everybody, you could do what you want on my page and on my socials. I don't really give a like, it's thug life.
If this was true, it'd be admirable. But when it comes down to it, everything else about the Game's public presence would suggest that he does care. Besides that, the claim that he doesn't care because all of his albums go #1 anyway doesn't necessarily hold weight, as he hasn't reached the top spot on hip-hop charts since 2016 with 1992. As for the Hot 100, its highest peak hasn't been breached since 2011. While none of us are above acting rashly, there's ultimately a difference between genuine acts of passion or acting stupid in the heat of battle and manufacturing beef in the name of promotion. And by 42 years of age, the Game should be his most authentic self. When other rappers have had completely new arcs of their life and reinvented themselves, the Compton MC has stuck to what brought him to the game, even when he should have long outgrown it.